Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to another discussion video on EVE Online, because in today's video I want to talk a little bit about the alpha clones and the changes that are coming to the game, or that CCP is planning for the December release on alpha clones. Now I'm going to give you guys my opinion on all of this a little bit, and as a result I actually think that it might be interesting to see what kind of experience you're having with EVE Online at the moment. So depending on how you're playing EVE, I think you'll have possibly different perspectives on CCP's plans when it comes to the changes to alpha clones. And so if you're willing, feel free to post in the comments how you are playing EVE Online at the moment, and by that I mean, are you an alpha clone, are you an omega character, and if you're omega, if you're willing, how many accounts are actually subscribed at the moment. That would be pretty interesting. I myself am omega. I've been paying a subscription to EVE Online since I started the game, and I stick to one account. I don't pay for or grind for a second, third, possibly 10th account or whatever it is that some of you crazy guys do out there. But I'm very much interested in learning those demographics when it comes to my viewers. It's a nice perspective, I think, that will also give you different perspectives on what CCP is doing at the moment. So let's move on to those dev blogs in question. Then we can always go to the community website, look for dev blogs, and then we'll start with clone states, the next steps. So this dev blogs talks basically about expanding the skill point pool for alpha characters, for free-to-play characters, and the goal, I think, is to provide free-to-play players with a more rounded experience of what it's like to play EVE Online. And in order to do that, they are going to unlock more skills, namely Tech 2 small and medium weapons, making up to cruisers much more efficient in PvP and in PvE. That's actually pretty damn important. They're also going to unlock battle cruisers and battleships for the alpha characters. That is pretty major. I do think that that can be a pretty big hook for those new players that start EVE free to play, right? Working your way to a battleship is something that is often a dream of people, and as a result this will now become accessible for your alpha character. So even if you're not subscribing, once you've gained the ability to fly a battleship, you'll be able to do so even if you don't pay your subscription. And I think actually the biggest one, which was mostly expected, but is also going to have a pretty major impact on what alpha characters can do, is that all factions will now be accessible. That is actually pretty major, because this should also put stuff like pirate ships into range for alpha characters. And so now you can see that potentially alpha characters might be able to fly the Gila, for instance, with Tech 2 weapons, and thus be very, very efficient high-sec explorers. They could also get into battleships and battle cruisers, which are often null-sec doctrines, and even I think potentially the Macarial might be in range for them now, which I think is something that CCP will keep a close eye on. They have said that the battleships is a pretty big step, and potentially if you have all of those skill points and you can fly the Macarial that you need, why would you pay a subscription for those fleet characters? You could just create more of them, for instance. That is possibly a mechanic that might get looked into by CCP. If that would happen, then they may tone that down a little bit somehow, but keep in mind, Tech 2 weapons for the battleships will not be available to free-to-play characters, and as a result I don't think that that is going to be an option that is chosen too much, that you're just gonna drop your subscription because all you do is fly your Alliance Doctrine in fleets anyways, or all that character does is fly Alliance ships, Alliance Doctrines, which would be battleships of course in that case. So this change is in my opinion expected and a pretty good idea, giving free-to-play players a goal to work towards that is very much in line with something that I would say a lot of people is their upper limit to what they feel comfortable with, right? I don't feel comfortable going for a super carrier. Even if I could pay one, losing that would be a very bad day for me. That is just a step that I'm not willing to take. And so yeah, the big rule, don't fly what you can't afford to lose. For lots of people, I do think that that means up to subcaps is never a problem, and so you can now, as a free-to-play player, potentially get into the biggest possible ships in EVE Online that don't feel like a massive investment that you're then going to lose, which is up to battleships. I like the change. Of course, this also means that CCP needs to look into the training, and so the option on this dev blog is that you can still train 5 million skill points for free. And the skill point of unlimited use, that pool is 20.5 million. If you want a full list of all the skill points that are available, it's down here on the dev blog as well. Might be interesting for alpha clone viewers to take a look at that. But very importantly, of course, 5 million skill points is the pool that you can train for free. Once you have those 5 million skill points, your training queue is going to stop, and you'll need to find other ways to earn the other 15.5 million skill points, which was of course at first planned to be an Omega subscription or earn your way in game to get skill injectors to fill up all of those skill points. But that is going to change because CCP is now providing alpha characters with a new training option, which is the latest dev blog, and it's a little bit controversial. It's called the Daily Alpha Injector. Nice little model for that, but once again, you know, that's something that you can see pop up on free-to-play games as well. And basically they had some requirements for this. Alphas must be able to acquire training in small chunks, ideally 1 day's worth. And so with the Daily Alpha Injector they're doing that, of course, which I think is understandable if you want to appeal to people that don't want to pay a subscription right away, but you want to give them the option to feel like they're making progress. An item like that would be the way to do it. Training rate from this new option must not be faster than Omega. Of course, you've got subscribers that are paying, and you don't want to make that obsolete with this new item. Must not activate Omega state or put characters in a new clone state. This is for alpha clones only, and it's also tradable on the market, which I think is very important. It's really going to be the niche for this market, is that this will basically give free-to-play players the option to either earn these, which is going to be around 20 plex worth, I think, on average, in-game, so you can buy those in-game, or if you want to continue that and get the most out of it, from time to time you may need to buy one from CCP. So here are the basic rules of the Daily Alpha Injector. Only 1 daily injector may be used per day per character. Resets at downtime. Right, this is to keep you from basically creating a massive pot of SP just on a few clicks. So it's once a day. May only be used by characters in alpha clone state. That makes sense, of course. Can be purchased in the NES for Plex or purchased for real money on the EVE Online website, which, well, is probably controversial part, because that does mean that it is creating SP out of thin air. Can be activated to immediately add 50,000 of those skill points created out of thin air to your character's unallocated skill pool, but it's roughly 1 day worth of Omega training. And so that is the counter argument to that, is that if you're paying a subscription, that's basically the same thing. You're also creating skill point out of thin air, but you're paying a sub for that. And so can be traded in game and does not award Omega status. Basically, this is still within the rules, but it is once again at the very edge of what falls within the rules. This item, because it's not as efficient as paying a subscription, should not be seen as a direct sink of SP that wouldn't be there otherwise, or that could potentially become a problem. The restrictions on that are very harsh, and they are, of course, so that this cannot be abused to create SP out of thin air in such vast amounts that it's going to end up game breaking, and I think it does that. Daily use, and of course it's less SP than if you would pay a subscription. And so as a result, most arguments against this are the slippery slope argument, right? This is another step towards towards pay to win, towards breaking the sandbox rules, but it doesn't do that objectively speaking, I think. But let's move on to some opinions on this, because I do think that there are some problems with this daily alpha injector. And first of all, I would say I'm seeing two major problems with this when it comes to user friendliness and the adaptation of this from free-to-play players. Because I think that basically the daily use is a big problem. You have to come online every day to add 50,000 little skill points to your skill points queue, and every day that you do that is going to remind you that you can potentially buy this straight from CCP, but that it's still going to be worse than actually paying a subscription. And so I think that most players will basically skip this altogether, will just make the calculation of, alright, I want to fly the Gila, I want to fly the Macarial, I want my 20.5 million skill points as fast as possible. How many months do I need to subscribe for that? And that's what they'll then do, spend that 45 euros or whatever, pay for 3 months, get into the skill points that you need and be done with it, rather than to have to come online daily for 60 or 90 days to every day put in that daily alpha injector to get those 50,000 skill points, which is still going to then take you longer than just paying the game. And so I think that basically it's really not user friendly, and it's worse than paying your subscription, and as a result I don't think it's going to really be used all that much. The only players that I can see using this are those that would be balancing this out between paying real life money and actually buying them from your in-game currency as well. So if you could, for instance, get 5 out of 7 days this daily extractor from the market, and then the other 2 days, if you want to absolutely fill that up, you just pay a couple dollars to CCP, or you have a Plex from CCP, and then you go into the next the NES store. That is probably the market that this will work for, but I don't see this as being really all too good a hook, because basically people will always be better off, and I think when it comes to paying money, they'll always make that calculation. They'll be better off paying for a subscription, and it will still feel like they have to make that choice. Do I subscribe for a couple of months to fill up that pool, or do I not subscribe for a couple of months? And so this item is not going to change the retention of alpha characters any more or any less than what the previous devblog is going to do to alpha characters. That is my opinion, of course, and I would love to hear yours. And on that note, I would also say that, yeah, this is not breaking the sandbox rules. This is completely within the rules. It is giving alpha characters more options. I can understand that. I think that it's just so user unfriendly that it's not going to adopt it all that much, especially the daily aspect of this. But it's still okay. On the other hand, of course, it's something that I've said before. EVE Online is changing and the industry is changing. EVE Online is now more than a decade old, and here I am again seeing an attempt to fix something that CCP has also said when they first introduced the skill extractors and the skill injectors, and that is that when that was first introduced, I still vividly remember that from the dev blog, it was also touted as a potential option for newer players to catch up to existing players. And I've said right off the bat that's never going to work, because existing players are just going to use that themselves. And it turns out that I think that that's what mostly happened. This has given the most established players the options to optimize their skill point pools, to create alts as quickly as they want for the best meta, Rorcal pilots, carrier pilots, whatever they want. That's what this has really been useful for, rather than giving new players a leg up. Was never going to happen, and this doesn't do that either, because this is still worse than paying for your subscription. And that is a big problem that that EVE Online is basically, I think, having when it comes to newer players. It's this feeling that you are starting the game 13 years too late, basically. This is the only game that does that. It's something that I say very often as well. EVE Online is the only game that I personally regret not starting sooner. And that is because of that harshness here, that you can't catch up to established players. All the time that you've spent not playing EVE Online is time that you'll never get back, potential that you'll never get back, and you're always starting at that block 0, which is something that has completely fallen in other games, right? I mean, it's the game that must never be named, but I'm going to name it anyway. World of Warcraft. you're no longer getting the same XP now from level 0 to 20 as what you did when the game first launched. That's just the way it is. And in fact, something that was completely inconceivable when those MMOs were first launched and in the first few expansion is now something that's completely normal and accepted. You can buy yourself a boost to 10 levels from max so that you can get straight into the latest expansion and the latest content for the game. That is something that was completely unthinkable, I would say even six years ago or something like that, and it's now completely normal. And I would say on this here, as a final note, this isn't there yet. This is still fully within the rules of the sandbox, fully respecting all of your older subscriptions. I must say it has fallen in other games. I fully expect that to at some point also fall in EVE Online. If, as I think, these daily alpha injectors are not going to have the impact that CCP expects on retention for alpha clones, then that is the only next step that they can do, is that for those skill points, those alpha skill points, which almost everyone has in the game, right? Getting into battle cruisers, getting into battleships, that stuff that everyone has. At some point that domino is going to fall and they'll just have to give that leg up for new players so that they feel like catching up in EVE Online, so that they have to increase basically the starting point for those new players. So I'm not sure if it is going to happen, but at this point, when you look at what's happening in the game, what CCP is trying to do, I must say something that I've said in the previous discussion video as well: don't get overly attached to what you have in the game. At this point, established players have this massive amount of wealth and especially this massive skill point advantage over new players. Don't expect that to last forever. I don't think that that is something that is tenable. We've seen it fall in any other MMO by now. Faster XP gain when, you know, if you've been playing World of Warcraft since the beginning, right, you can still remember the grind that you had to do to get to level 60 at first. That grind is not there anymore. Players just zoom right through that in no time at all. And yeah, that is just the way the games are changing, the way the industry is changing, and I personally do expect that this might happen in EVE Online as well at some point. It would be very unfortunate because it would be a bit of breaking the rules of the sandbox. Because somehow then that means that CCP will have to create that SP at a rate that is completely undoable or has been undoable in the game before, but if they want to compete with the abilities that other MMOs now give to players to jump straight into the juicy content, that is something that I think at some point they'll have to consider. They probably already have considered that. Just at this point, CCP has correctly handled everything within the norm of all subscribers, retaining everything that they've subscribed for in the past, and of course following the sandbox rules themselves. And this is still just within that, but you can see that edge coming closer and closer, and that pressure is on. It's just a reality, guys. EVE Online is changing, the games industry is changing. I think the best way to go about this is to make sure that CCP doesn't go completely in the wrong direction with stuff like loot boxes and drill pay to win, but we also have to accept that for newer players coming into the game, I can imagine that it is very daunting to imagine years and years of training you have to do just to be able to compete with someone else in a doctrine, in nullsec or something like that, and that is something that at some point CCP will have to provide them with an option for. So anyways, that's going to be it for this discussion video, guys. Definitely feel free to post in the comments your thoughts on all of this. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.